I know that this sounds fantastical and wild, and honestly, I couldn't disagree. This is in fairly remote backcountry, West Virginia, which is known for being old and haunted. It was experienced entirely by the two of us, but the worst parts by all four. This led to all four of us at some point battling personal issues in our lives that I believe stemmed directly from this encounter. The following is, at least to my memory and what I've been able to corroborate with the other people that were there, 100% accurate and true. So when I was 17, 2004, we had a bad experience camping near haunted train tunnels and sites of sudden tragic death. The history of the immediate 1 square mile area is that mother and son drowning in the creek nearby, drug dealers killed in state police shootout at a nearby hunting cabin, and many years before, cheap laborers had been killed building this double set of train tunnels. They were actually buried in a long-forgotten little graveyard nearby the tunnels that has since been found and restored. We decided to go camping before graduation, as a friend group of 4, just to do something one last time before we all went our separate ways in life. This is a private property on the backside of a big hill around which the creek flows in a huge several-mile-long bend. Camp set up and fire going. Shortly after nightfall, my cousin and I sat back on the creek bed, maybe 20 yards away from the camp spotlight, a fish in the water. We then began to hear a sort of, rhythmic sloshing sound. A slosh of what sounded like somebody wading through the water, maybe halfway up to their shin deep. So we shined the light around upstream, and we then spotted symmetrically and rhythmically consistent disturbances made by what looked and sounded like invisible feet or legs sloshing toward us. When we would turn our spotlights off, it would start again. It would then stop when illuminated, and whatever it was definitely reacting to us. And this was the first ice bucket stomach clench moment we knew that this was not fish and could not rationalize what was actually happening. This scared us pretty badly, but we decided best to be kept to ourselves and join the others gathered at the fire suddenly. As we made our way back, we heard the sloshing make its way to where we were on the bank and the noise stopped. Given the speed that we witnessed it moving and how far it was from us when we were watching it, it must have sped up to make it to the bank that we were on in the amount of time that it took us to get to the camp. Others at the camp heard it as well and figured that we'd either gotten in or somehow riled up some fish, but we just played it off in the end. And as crazy as it sounded and looked like an invisible person wading towards us through the water. After the noise ended at the creek bank, we then all saw the tall grass disturbed as something that we couldn't see ran around the foliage perimeter of our circularly cleared campsite. Now, this could have been an animal, I admit, but whatever it was fast. We then began to hear what sounded like a man talking to us, as in speaking into the ear of each person, the left ear, if that matters. At first, it sounded like garble, really, but after maybe 15 to 20 seconds, we could make out the words saying we shouldn't be there, and we needed to leave, before finally addressing us directly, and saying slightly more forcefully, "You need to leave." Obviously, as you can imagine, this was absolutely terrifying. And at first we thought that it was a person or group of people out there walking up on our camp and that it was dangerous. We were all frozen with fear though, but then adrenaline suddenly hit. As we freaked out and started to run to our ATV, all 4 of us saw what we all described as a tall black shadow man wearing what looked like a hat, relaxing against the front of our ATV. It straightened up when we saw it and it saw us allegedly, and it just sort of hung there staring at us for a few seconds. No feet, the legs ended in sort of wavy lines like looking above the fire at the heat waves. It stood out against the dark night behind it though, and it was definitely there. The girl screamed, which broke our fear freeze, and it zipped like the flash back towards the train tunnels people had died in. Interestingly, when we went to start the ATV, it sort of turned over sluggishly as if the battery had been slightly drained, despite working fine not long before when we rode it down. This entire event happened over the course of, I want to say maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and within an hour of the sun going down. After putting our story out there, I received a lot of feedback from people as well who have also had bad encounters in this area over many years. Even a guy I worked with who didn't know that we knew this area told me that my uncle had hired him to trap in that area, and it was the only place that he didn't check traps alone at night. He said that it was almost like the animals leave the place at night and it was completely quiet out there. No less than a month later, my uncle who owns the property was up on the hill raccoon hunting at night with a dog. At some point the dog was on a rock face up above him and actually knocked a large rock loose that fell and struck my uncle in the side of the neck. This understandably messed him up pretty bad and paralyzed almost his entire body, but he still had limited functionality on his left side. We could never figure out how he got himself back to his ATV and turned it over and drove himself out of there because, really, he just wasn't capable of that anymore. It wasn't until probably maybe 2 or 3 years later, around Halloween, when my story makes its rounds on the local Facebook groups, that my uncle texted my mother out of the blue. You have no reason to believe my uncle's character reference, but honestly, he is a salt-of-the-earth, hunting, farming, working sort of man, even working past his retirement as a millionaire. He's honest, funny, and just incredibly a stand-up guy. He is easygoing, but also no nonsense for sure. In his text to my mother, though, he said, "I've never told anybody this before, and I probably won't again. But the man in the hat that the kids saw at the creek that night helped pick me up off the ground and put me back on the ATV and turned me around." Until I heard that, I had always assumed that the Shadow Man was the one who was trying to scare us out of there, but thinking back on it, maybe he was the one whispering to us, telling us that we needed to leave and possibly avoid something scarier and more dangerous. Although I honestly have no idea what could have been scarier than that.